I'd like to make a motion to call this public service meeting to order.
Second.
Did it purposely. I waited till you walked over there. Pursuant to the open meeting law, Chapter 30A, Section 7, just want to inform any person that's making any sort of audio tape or videotape of this, they have to announce it now. Seeing none, we can move on. So we're just going to go kind of in line here. So if I can have a motion made to take item number 1, which is the review of the mayoral appointee of Miss Graber. Am I saying that correct?
So moved.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Come on and just grab a seat. Probably this one here because there's a microphone. And it's pretty much informal. First of all, we thank you for wanting to get involved and volunteering. And so this meeting is just kind of a prelude to tomorrow night where you'll get voted on, I'm sure. So just tell us a little bit about yourself and why you want to be on this position. Then any city councilor here can ask any question, and that's how it goes. So welcome. Just make sure the green button's on. Green light, rather.
Oh, there we go.
There you go. And just give us some information about it.
Okay. Hi, I'm Rachel Graber, Holyoke resident for the past 10 years. I'm a midwife in Holyoke at the Holyoke Medical Center, and I've been wanting to get active at the public library, and then I saw that there was an opening to be on the board, and so I contacted the director, and I've been going to meetings, and I'm happy to represent Holyoke.
Is there any major issues facing the library now? It's
Not
kind
currently.
of quiet. I was going to say,
Yeah.
which is a good thing.
Yeah, it's good.
Right. Does anybody have any questions?
Sure.
Go ahead.
Thanks for coming down, Rachel. So there's no major issues at the library at this point. It's just a matter of fine tuning. So do you have any particular projects that you'd like to bring to the board or a vision for what you'd like to see the fine tuning look like?
Yeah, I'm really interested in getting people more access to the library, getting more patrons in. I have young kids, so I'm also really interested in outreach to the schools and to different communities within Holyoke. So, yeah.
Rachel, thank you for coming forward, and certainly your qualifications speak for themselves. My colleagues here say there's no major issues, but there's always an ongoing issue. And are you familiar with how the library is governed?
A little bit, yeah. I've been going to some of the meetings, so I know that there are certain spots that became open to the community because of the expansion. I don't know if that's what you're referring to, but so I know
There
a
is
little bit about it.
a group I refer to as the Friends of the Holyoke Public
yeah,
Library, who are wonderful people who are very instrumental in the fundraising for for a portion of the outbuild of the current library. Very instrumental over the years in running projects and working closely with the library itself. We, as a city, though, are responsible for the employees of the library and the well-being of the daily operations. And there's a governing board that is at some point in time supposed to merge and become one.
Yes.
And I just ask you to keep that in the back of your mind, that that's important from both a legal standpoint and from a governmental standpoint of where we should be. But your ideas and goals are noble, because that's what a library is about, and I think we're all on the same page with that, and that's what counts.
Okay. Great.
Anybody else have any questions? See none. Entertain a motion to approve the mayor's recommendation.
Second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
The ayes have it. So thank you very much.
Thanks.
Do you have any questions for us?
I don't think so.
Okay, so
Thanks.
what happens tomorrow night, we have a full city council meeting, and during the public service part of it, we'll bring this report up, and I don't see any complications going. So after tomorrow, you can come back, hypothetically everything goes well, which I think it will, you can come down to the city clerk's department, get sworn in.
Okay.
If
and
you do
I
have
just,
any, sorry?
I just do that on my own time, or?
Yeah,
Yeah.
preferably before the next meeting, because I'm
Okay,
sure they'll probably need you for a vote.
Yeah, yeah.
And if you do have any questions, do not hesitate, any of the city councilors.
Okay, so will I get notification if I'm approved tomorrow?
Uh,
Or should I just assume that I am unless?
Brian will email you or call you.
Okay, all right, because the next meeting's next Tuesday, so I'd like to get in before that.
Yeah, no,
Okay.
I agree with that. So tomorrow night, we'll vote on it. Then you'll have the
Anytime
next
after
Tuesday to
that?
get sworn in.
Okay,
If
Great.
any questions, don't hesitate to call us.
All right, thanks.
Thank you. All right, so let's take item number 2. Item number 2 is entertain a motion to take off the table.
Second.
Order filed by Mayor Morse. Subject to your approval, I hereby appoint the following person as a member of the Holyoke Economic Development Industrial Corporation, otherwise known as HEDIC. Mr. Mark P. Cutting, 40 Briarwood Drive, Holyoke, Mass. This seat on the Board of Directors represents the industrial community sector. Mr. Cutting will serve a 3-year term, which will expire June 30th, 2021. Mr. Cutting, hello, sir. Also a proud father of Holyoke Colleen. Have a seat, sir. I can't forget.
Mr. Parade Committee over here.
Yes. Mr. Cutting is well known to all of us. So you just heard exactly what we just said. So you just give us a brief synopsis of why you want to be on this. Any counselor can ask you any question and move forward from there.
So I'm Mark Cutting, president of C&D Electronics. We're located at 20 Appleton Street in Holyoke.
Say that again, CNS?
C&D Electronics.
C&D.
Yeah. I've been living in Holyoke for the past 35 years, and time flies. My family is, my 2 girls, my wife reside, my wife in Holyoke and my daughter's in West Hartford, Connecticut, and I have another daughter in Boston. They went to the school system here, and it's a great place to live. As I mentioned, I'm president of C&D Electronics. We're a distributor of electronic components to the aerospace and defense industry, so we support manufacturing and engineering across the country, actually globally. We've been in business for actually close to 36 years. So we're happy to be here. My interest is obviously in the industrial area. Actually, back we're trying to remember, I think something like 20 years ago, I was on the HEDIC board and was very involved in the community at the time. And then the mayor had asked me to revisit that position, and I graciously accepted that as long as I can get confirmed. I think it's a great opportunity. Holyoke's been growing over the past 10 years and going in the right direction. I'm not only a business owner, but I also own real estate in the city of Holyoke. We spent a lot of effort, time, money in trying to develop our operations down at 20 Appleton Street. I think it's a great opportunity for me because I have a vision here, and I think economic development's key to the city. I've always been a supporter here, and I think it's a great opportunity to have a kind of fresh eyes on what's going on in the community and how we can help foster some growth economically with HEDIC, with their funding opportunities and maybe micro loans, and see if there's any other ways we can maybe increase the exposure on, increase the dollar value that's given out, and encourage people to come to the city of Holyoke.
Yep, go ahead. Counselor.
Thank you. So I'm really excited to have you here, Mr. Cutting, and I'm also excited about the work that you did to bring in Rise Holdings, which Rise Holdings today. And you spoke briefly in your introduction that you have a vision, and I think I like your vision because I like what you've done to open the doors to Rise. But could you speak a little bit more about what your vision for downtown Holyoke is, and in particular related to the industrial opportunities that we have?
I think the GTI was a great opportunity for the city of Holyoke. I was a supporter for them right from the beginning. It's bringing jobs and development here where it's definitely needed. And we've seen, over the years how there's been a downturn in manufacturing, and this is kind of like the new manufacturing, if you will. But my issue is how do we beautify the industrial community? We've been on Appleton Street for the past 20 plus years. We've seen, kind of a slow burn down there, deterioration and activity, unfortunately, needles and defacing buildings. And so my hope is that if we can bring more business here in this community and create some commerce here, that we'll be able to see some growth and turn the corner here in this community.
Thank you.
Councilor McGivern.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, just in the form of a disclosure, as you know, but publicly, I am a mayoral appointment to the board of the HEDIC board itself, and have been for some time. I have served with Mr. Cuddy before. I know firsthand experience that he's a welcome addition to our board. his credentials speak for himself, and I think Councilor Lisi has also pointed out, even more recently, his activity within the area of this city has always been in a positive way to promote growth. Mark, I welcome you back, and since the last time you were involved, the city has revisited, or I should say, opened our redevelopment board, which some people see as a competition with HEDIC, and some people see it as it should replace HEDIC. Others of us think that either a merger or coexistence would make more sense. Have you given any thought to that, or has the mayor or anyone talked to you about that?
Not in detail. I know that there's some conversation around either the merging aspect of it or continue to stay standalone. And I'll be quite honest, I haven't had a lot of time to put a lot of thought into that situation, but I'd be certainly, I'm certainly glad to get involved and try to get a better grip on what the concerns or issues may or have been.
Yeah. It's interesting too, because part of your opening remarks talked about the revolving loan that HEDIC and the assets that HEDIC has, and I think that's a keen awareness, because some of that has fallen to the wayside, and I'm not too sure why. We're not too sure why, but we would like to redirect it so that we do see more, especially smaller companies applying for businesses and applying for loans to help their business to growth or to buy machinery and whatnot. But thank you for coming forward, and I look forward to serving with you again.
Great. Thank you very much. Appreciate that.
Entertain a motion to approve the confirmation. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
The ayes have it.
Thank you.
And I obviously will speak in favor of you as well, and I will do it tomorrow night as well. So tomorrow night, we have the meeting. I see no hesitation on everyone approving you. I can't speak for everyone, but I just don't see any issues. And so after that, I would strongly recommend getting sworn in before the next HEDIC meeting. Any questions for us?
Good. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate
Have
the
a
time.
great night, sir.
Thank you. Have a great
Good seeing you again.
Thank you.
You want to just continue going in order, or do you want?
I think we should take up the orders related to Jeannie.
Sure. So as a package, or is it 3, 4,
3,
3, 4?
6.
What about 4?
Oh, yeah. Well, they're not here yet, so
Okay.
we'll wait on that one. 3, 6, and let's do 7 first.
So want to go 7?
Yeah.
All right, so we're kind of going out of order, and by the way of housekeeping, I do want to, for the people at home, I do have Councilor Lisi to my right, she's Councilor at Large. I also have Councilor McGivern to my left, Councilor at Large as well, and I'm Jim Leahy, Councilor at Large. We're going to skip down to item number 7, which is an order filed by Rebecca Lisi. Let me just get it.
We're going to invite the G&E in for the next couple of orders, so if you want to take a seat inside of the bench.
All right.
Hot seat, gentlemen.
Hello, gentlemen. All right, so I'm going to make a motion to take up, or I'm going to entertain a motion to take up an order that was filed by Rebecca, Councilor Lisi. Order the City Council adopt a resolution to support local control over municipal clean energy standards and portfolios. All in favor?
So
Aye.
Ayes have it.
So, Mr. Lavelle, this was an order that I filed after understanding that the state legislature was going to be voting on state legislation that would affect the way that the G&E is credited some of these clean energy standards and portfolios. So it is somewhat of a moot point because the legislation is no longer on the table. Do you remember? This was the carve out for the, I think the existing nuclear.
Yes.
So I don't know if it makes sense for you to perhaps, we couldn't move it forward before the full council in a timely manner, but since you're here tonight and it's on the agenda, if you could give us a brief synopsis of what it would have done so that perhaps we're in a better position to help next time around.
Sure. A lot of the legislation that was proposed during the current session was aimed at pulling municipals into what's called a renewable portfolio standard. And it would require us to have a certain percentage of different renewable energy resources in our portfolio, which we are not at all opposed to having renewable, and we already, as a system for Holyoke, significantly exceed what is required for hydro, solar, and other forms of renewable. But what this would do, it would require us, it would not recognize our hydro. I mean, we have a large hydro system that was built before 1997, and that's a cutoff date for qualification for what's called the RECs, or the Renewable Energy Credit. So in effect, the short of it, the proposed legislation would have, ignored the fact that we already have renewable resources. It would have required us to go out and buy renewable energy credits. So doubling the cost as a minimum of the energy rates for the Holyoke ratepayers.
And is there anything that we can do to help this along any further, or should we ask our state delegation to perhaps revisit this issue from a different angle?
Can I just ask a question on that? He just said that it would have doubled the rates. Is that what you just said?
Double the energy portion of the rate, which is, 70% of the rate, yeah.
So let me just ask, why would we want to help move that along?
If the state legislation passed the way that it is, that would be the effect. And what we were trying to do was urge our state delegation to carve out an exemption for small municipal lighting companies.
Yeah, the municipal light plants are defined by local control. So the commissions in each of the 41 municipal light plant communities set the policies and standards. So the proposed order is to continue that ability in local control.
So, and again, we don't get recognized for the hydro under the regulations that they were trying to pass. And so we were trying to carve out this exemption alongside other municipals so that we would retain that local control and ability to get credit for the portfolio that we do have. But is it currently still active in session, or is it?
Well, the next session will be starting the beginning of the year, and so all those same bills will be back on the floor. We'll be back in flow anyway.
So then, would it make sense that we do adopt the resolution that we drafted, or
Yes.
perhaps we should amend it so that we have current? I think that would be the thing to do, to perhaps once the bills are refiled for the next session, amend the resolution so that it reflects the current bills and the orders that.
So we can monitor the filings.
The docket numbers, sorry.
So we can monitor the filings and report to you whether they're the same issues, or in addition to those same issues, other issues.
So I'd like to just ask my two colleagues. So this was sent to committee and as a resolution to put pressure on our representatives for the previous session. Like, this is somewhat delayed. But how do you think, what would be the best way to be able to get something passed in council and have everybody feel that they're like up to speed and versed and can vote on something? Because I think one of the things that sent it over to committee is that people didn't understand what was before us.
I have a great answer to that, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, should
Perhaps
come to
those city
subcommittees.
councilors who don't understand it would be here
Right.
to learn more about it. Sorry, Councilor Lisi.
Go ahead.
If I could, Jim, are there any other options we can do? A resolution, I agree with Councilor Lisi, it's necessary and it's a prudent and right thing to do, but what else can we do? Because a resolution, there aren't that many municipal gas and electrics. The resolution is
Right.
going to be helpful, but I don't think in Boston, a lot of people are going to pay attention to this.
No, our delegation has been very active. So Rep. Vega actually a few weeks ago had the chairman of the Energy and Telecommunications Committee in town, and we toured him around and just to make sure he's well aware of the story. And again, it's not at all that we're against renewable energy. I mean, we're marching faster than anyone towards trying to eliminate our carbon footprint, but we ought to do it in a way that makes most sense for Holyoke and Holyoke ratepayers. So I think, Councilor McGivern, our delegation is working very hard. We have a municipal agency, the Municipal Electric Association of Massachusetts, who's working with all of the municipal groups, and there's a couple other industry groups that are working and maybe in some cases lobbying as well. So there is a statewide effort underway.
And do you know if other communities have effectively passed resolutions, like other communities with the municipal light and power companies, if they've passed resolutions?
I am not aware of any.
That may be something to do in the interim while we're waiting for the new docket numbers. Perhaps I could reach out to State Rep. Vega to see if we can have some sort of concerted effort from the municipalities and the local councils to put that pressure, and then the lobbying firm can then demonstrate that local voters are aware of the issue and would appreciate the support of the state legislature.
Yes, and I think the chairman of the House Committee is well aware of municipals. Although he's from Lowell, he wishes that he had a municipal light plant in his district. So he's been supportive as well.
Okay. I think we can say that this has been complied with for now, and I'll refile a new order. And perhaps when I file the new order, in order to expedite the process, although we'll have more time next time around, it may make sense to have you come into a full council meeting just to answer questions.
Be happy to.
Yeah.
And thank you for your help.
Thank you.
All right, Councilor McGivern?
I'm all set, thank you.
Okay, so just complied with?
I
All right,
think so.
Second? All in favor? Thank you.
Aye.
Okay, so we also, which one do you want to take up next?
3, maybe not in 3, sorry. And then item 6.
6. All right, I'll entertain a motion to take up item number 6, which was introduced by Councilor Lisi. Order that the recent FCC rulings on net neutrality, that the City Council invite representative from the Gas and Electric to discuss the public access to broadband, fiber, and the G&E's ability to provide free citywide Wi-Fi. All in
moved.
favor?
Aye.
All. Great. Councilor?
Thank you so much. I think that when the FCC ruling came out, there was a lot of conversation about how we can retain local control over internet access content. And I know that we have a robust fiber network, but it's not accessible to residents. I've also done quite a bit of traveling, and every time I'm in some sort of European city, they give you free wireless access. They want to collect some data from you, email and some demographic data. And I just think that's really a great way to increase like tourism and be able to market to people. So if we're collecting some demographic info from people that are logging into our free citywide Wi-Fi network, then we could also be marketing the city and opportunities and industrial developments, et cetera, to a more targeted and purposive audience. So I know that they're two different issues, but they all kind of came up around the same event. And so if you could give us an update on where the fiber network is, how likely we can get residential access to fiber, if there is such a timeline for that, and then also what's the ability for the G&E to provide free citywide Wi-Fi?
Sure. And first, I'll just, with me here tonight is Kirk Jonah. He's our Director of Telecommunications and IT, so he's going to correct me and bail me out if I dig myself in a ditch here. Can I start with the net neutrality issue? So that ruling really has no impact on our operations or our network. The 3 things the repeal did was take restrictions off of blocking access to certain sites, throttling traffic of certain categories, and paid prioritization, which is the concern was that bigger players would be able to pay for priority access. But we open on an open access, non-discriminatory basis. So we've been operating the same way. This ruling has no impact on us or our customers.
But just to interject and make it really clear, but it does have an impact on us who are buying Wi-Fi from Comcast, for example.
I've not heard of anybody who's been impacted either before the change a few years ago or since the beginning of the year when it was changed back. So I think there's a lot of discussion about it, but I have not talked to a single or read a single article about those impacts that were talked about being potentially threatening.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor McGivern?
Thank you. Jim, Kirk, nice to meet you. We've studied similar issues and always would love to see, the broadband, the internet, whatever you could possibly offer to your residential customers. But at one time, I think it was the feeling, and Kirk, maybe you can back this up, that financially and to make it work as municipal company that you are, you really need all three. You need telephone, you need the internet, and you need the cable to go with it. a
Package,
deal.
yeah.
Is that still the feeling?
So let me, my son, who graduated from UMass, all he wants is bandwidth. He has his TV, he has his Xbox, and all he cares about is bandwidth. He doesn't care about the ESPN or any of that stuff. So I like Nesson and I like my games. So I like that package. So you have that, right? You have that competing, where some just want bandwidth. It's called over the top. You know, they're doing Netflix, they're doing other things over the bandwidth and YouTube and getting what they need.
That's me.
So you got to balance that, right? You're going to have the individual that, you know, my mother, she wants the clicker. You hit 1, you hit 2, you hit 3, and she gets her TV. So you got to balance that. So some people want all three. A lot of people are getting away from phone as well. You know, they use their cell phone versus their home line. I personally use my home line for my security system. I keep it separate. So some people want all three, but you're seeing really bandwidth is really what people want.
In order for, if the city were to go forward or look to go forward, does it still make sense that you would have to be able to offer all three? Or is it, or
Well,
things changed?
Well, first of all, you're going to be looking at a capital investment to do that. So we've kind of tagged it about $25 to $30 million for a capital investment to really start to roll out fiber to the home. Then with that said, they call it the take rate. How many customers are willing to switch from what they currently have to your fiber? And you got to weight it too. You got to look at, what do I think the take rate's actually going to be? What's it going to cost? How long it's going to take to implement? And then how long of a period of time is it going to be till we can pay back the money and make some money on it?
Can I ask a question there?
Can I just finish so the answer, Joe, or Councilman, given to your question is no. We would, if we were going to move forward, we would not contemplate doing a bundle with video, phone, and, you know, other services. It would be a bandwidth play.
Strictly bandwidth.
I'm definitely in the bandwidth category, and I despise my provider because I have to buy cable in order to get the bandwidth that I need. I have to buy a package, and I don't even I don't have television in my house. We are watching everything on computers, devices.
Sure, yep.
Do you have data on how many customers you might get if you were to make that capital investment? Do you have data on what you expect the initial customer base to look like?
We have survey data that's all over the map.
Is it
So-
like national survey data, or is
No,
it?
we have local surveys. So we do a customer survey every 2 years typically, and we try to get a sense of if we did move in that direction. But what we're finding is, so let me start by saying we are very interested in trying to find a viable way of serving the residential sector. But, you know, we have a fiduciary obligation to the gas and electric ratepayers. And as Kirk mentioned, $25 to $30 million, we've got to make sure that we know pretty well what the take rate is going to be. And what we've worked with several municipalities recently, and some of them are in areas like with Leverett, Mass, there's no incumbent. So they build a network, they've got over 80% of the households tied to
800.
this. And others are now other communities with incumbents, Westfield is doing it, and we're working to try to understand that data, because what happens is you have a person or a customer commit, and we've seen it firsthand, where the customer says, yeah, I'm in, and they're committed to going it, and then the incumbent provider says, I'll reduce your bill by $100. So they say, okay, if I don't have to change anything, and I just reduce my bill by $100, no need to change. So you have to be very careful with what a customer says in a survey today, and if they're offered a savings tomorrow. So we've experienced that quite a bit. So we're suspect of survey data. We know that we'd have to get 25 to 30% of the market based on current estimates, but this is why we're continually trying to do this and to try to get history to see, all right, if you're 25% today, what is the trend in other communities where they've had take rates of 30% in the first year? Did they trail off or did they increase?
And then in your survey data, are you asking the question of, like, do you own a television? Because then I think you would have a better, some more certainty as to whether or not those people would transition to broadband, because they're not utilizing the cable.
No, I think we know where the trends are going. So I think, we would be looking more in the future that this network would be built for the future and for what are at least indicated as current trends for the future.
Okay. So then I would ask you to keep going in terms of how far into the future do you suspect that fiber would be made viable to residents?
Well, technically it is today, on a
It is
very,
technically?
very limited basis.
Right.
Kirk and his team have done a couple of pilot projects with the new Churchill apartments that were built. We put, in anticipation to try to see what the take rate would be there.
Mm-hmm.
And that was not as successful as we would have liked to seen. The Qubit building was a very different story where we got almost,
At least 50%.
yeah. So, and so what we're trying to do is manage the risk for the ratepayers to make sure that we can identify an area, a development, a neighborhood where it makes sense, where we can pretty much assure the return on the investment and that there's not going to be a risk to the ratepayers.
And were the Qubit and Churchill targeted because they already are in an area where the industrial network for fiber exists?
They were both buildings that were kind of, they're all open. So you can run fiber in, you can run it through the, run through the walls. It was much easier to run fiber to the different apartments. Plus, we had a business in the Qubit building as well that we're doing business with. So it just kind of made sense.
That's great, thanks. Okay.
Councilor McGivern, yes, sir.
Jim, you brought Kirk for your backup. You know very well my backup would be Brenda and Kelly, who are not here this evening. There's no doubt in my mind Brenda and Kelly would agree with Rebecca as far as the bandwidth and what their needs are and what they do, especially, their profession. However, the other two people in their life, Jamie and Pat, would agree with Kirk that the most important thing is to get that game on the weekend and to be able to have access to the TV at home. I understand the issues, and I don't know what the answer is. I know the answer is, and it's the ratepayers, the gas and electric, which the commission would have to make a decision, but a $30 million investment is a lot of money. And I think there have to be some hard data to support that could be, that investment would be taken care of in terms of the customer base growing that much. And I don't know how you find that out. It's a big
That's
risk.
why we've been treading it very carefully.
It's a major risk. I mean,
And it gives us an opportunity. We are working very closely with the other communities in the area, so we're getting firsthand data. So Kirk and his team are supporting South Hadley, Chicopee, Leverett, and a few other communities that are doing it. So we're getting a better sense of what the dynamic is in each community, and hopefully be able to have developed in the near future some means of trying to boil the data down to, at least make some assumptions that would be incorporated into our models.
Any final words on this fiber network? Okay. And then can we transition to the wireless?
Oh, sure. Is that the same order? You want? Okay, yep, go ahead.
So the short answer to the free wireless, it would be illegal.
Is that like national, like our
Oh,
national
well,
laws or federal?
The municipal light plants operate under Chapter 164, Section 58, which says that the rates have to reflect cost of service, and service can't be provided for below the cost of service. So, but we've been working for a while to try to get some level, the order suggested citywide. Free Wi-Fi, we've never looked at citywide in any kind of serious fashion, but we have looked at limited downtown, particularly the Innovation District, and we've been trying to find a way. We've been working with the Innovation District Task Force. We actually, a few years ago, designed, at least put a rough design together for downtown Wi-Fi, and there just haven't been funds available to launch. We have been recently in discussions with Holyoke Media because they have a revenue source. So those discussions will continue. We want to make sure, though, we don't get a lot of calls for, there's not a lot of demand that we hear of for, everybody likes Wi-Fi if they can turn their bandwidth or their, a paid service off to get free, they'll do it. But we had a limited downtown Wi-Fi service a long time ago that, we really didn't have a demand for, and we retired it. But we do understand some benefits of, drawing people in from out of towns and them having access to a service. So we'll continue to work towards trying to help get a service like that launched that has a funding source.
Do you think that, may I?
Oh, yeah, of course.
Do you think that there's an opportunity to create like certain hotspots? So you mentioned the innovation district, but what about like in and around the library? Like it seems like there's some natural hotspots that I could see, like Heritage State Park being another like hotspot.
When I say the innovation district, I think we included all those. So we took Lyman Street, Lyman and Maple, all the way over to, I think, Cabot, and then down to, is it Main Street?
Up, yeah.
Yeah.
So it includes that whole area.
Yes.
And you and just refresh me. So you had tried to see if you could create some wireless for that innovation district, but you are not moving forward with it at this point, or?
No, we put a design together, a rough design, just to
just a
see
rough
what it would
design.
cost to cover that area. It was somewhere in the neighborhood of I think that was 2012 we did
Yep.
that.
It's over 500,000.
Yeah, so it was like 500,000 to launch it. And the other thing too is whether it's free or someone's paying for it, people want the service to work and it needs support, and these are not maintenance-free endeavors. So there's an ongoing annual, and the technology has to be refreshed. So you got to build that into your operating budget as well. So the discussions we've had with Holyoke Media have been good. People understand what the task is. It's just a matter of trying to find the sources of funds.
And have you reached out to the chamber at all? Because I would imagine that would be attractive for them, again, with the ability to have people log in and collect some demographic data off of them. I think that would be an asset that they would want to make use of in terms of helping businesses market themselves.
They're on the task force for the Innovation District, and so yes, they're involved in those. The new chairperson, I don't think has been to a meeting, but Kathy had been very involved in those conversations.
Can you tell me who else is part of that task force? I don't think I even know of it. Is it somewhat ad hoc, like informal task force for the Innovation District, or?
Marcos is the chair.
Marcos is the chair.
Yeah, and he has a list of the members. But it's a regional, so there's the EDC, Pioneer Valley Planning Commission, and a few other, the regional workforce development.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I think that there are a handful of people in the audience that came down for this issue, and since there's not many, I'd like to make a motion to suspend the rules and see if members of the public have any questions that they're bringing down.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, the ayes have it. If anybody wants to come up and speak in regards to this, it's not a public hearing, so I guess we can allow them anyway, right? Just say your name and your address, please. Going once? Going twice? Oh,
There's a mic
Microphone right up
here.
here.
Yep.
you have
You
to turn
need
the
to
mic
turn
on.
it on and probably tilt it up so that it's more comfortable for you.
Thank you. Ken Lefebvre, 277 Suffolk Street. I just wanted to understand, has the HG&E done any research on a partial rollout like the South Hadley light plant is currently pursuing for certain neighborhoods where infrastructure may already exist, such as the downtown area?
Well, South Hadley is doing a commercial. They haven't announced a residential build.
It's been all over the news, actually. It's published in Mass Live as well as in the National Municipal Communications magazine.
Right, but they're going to start out just doing commercial first, and then from there, they're going to phase into a residential
Right,
approach.
but that's the sort of the gradual rollout, though, right? As far as they're not putting all of that investment money up front, they're sort of doing this in multiple phases, correct?
All I know is right now I'm working with them on rolling out commercially to a select area, and then from there, they're going to continue to evolve their fiber.
I guess my question is, has HG&E looked at just rolling out partial residential in the densest areas of the city? Because I imagine that would be a lot more cost effective than, say, in West Holyoke in the immediate future. That's basically the nature of my question.
We're designing it so that it could be rolled out in that fashion, yes.
In phases? In phases, rolled out in phases?
What Westfield is doing is, basically soliciting interest from their customer base in one particular neighborhood. So they've designed it in pockets, as we have a rough design of pockets. And so when any pocket reaches a critical mass over, I think, 30% interest and people pay deposits, they will begin to build there. So that was something we're heading towards, to be able to be in a position like that. One of the concerns we have, one of the concerns we have with that approach is, at some point you're going to have certain pockets filled, and you're going to be undersubscribed in other pockets, and there's going to be the disparity that's got to be dealt with.
In terms of service, or because or your own infrastructure?
In terms of service, because if you may have some people in a pocket that really want the service badly, but they're the only 5 people in the pocket, and then you don't have enough to justify the capital outlay in that pocket.
I see. Okay, thank you.
Thank you for the question.
Hi, I'm Laura.
You got to turn the mic on.
Oh, sorry.
First name, last name, address, please.
All right. Laura Clampett, 182 Locust Street. Here. Okay, sorry. So my question is similar to Ken's. It's my understanding that HG&E already has infrastructure in some areas of the city. So have you considered, what the cost would be to just offer residential service in those areas, or at least to try to solicit interest from those areas?
We have, in certain circumstances, we've gotten calls from people where we've got fiber right in front of their house, but the nearest splice point is 1,500 feet away. So you really, have a lot of work to do to go back to splice point and run to get a drop. So it ends up being a $4,000, $5,000 connection to get that customer. So even though the fiber may run by your doorstep, to actually connect you and put the equipment on your house to allow you to get the bandwidth, it's on a onesie twosie basis, it's difficult to make it viable for the customer to pay that kind of money. So we're trying to, that's why we're working with these other communities to try to hone in those plans where we can, even on a more limited or a broader basis, actually try to get some areas that make sense, that are dense, where we can make it cost effective to do that. But we still haven't solved this disparity issue.
And if I may, one more question. Have you been in contact with other city departments when they're, pulling up a street for, repaving or other reasons, or, like expanding gas service in an area, and they're already kind of having to repave that street? Has that been looked at as a way to,
Mitigate the cost?
Yeah, and, slowly roll out fiber throughout the city?
Short answer is yes. We work closely with the other city departments, and even internally, when we're doing an electric project where there's new conduits being put in a new neighborhood, we'll put conduits in anticipation of pulling fiber at some point.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I called HG&E because I needed to expand gas service to my house, and they, it was great. They did it for free, but they had to pull up the street already. So
That's it.
Yeah.
Who's in charge of that?
So thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
I'm going to ask a piggyback question on that, because I think one other way to look at that question is, so there's areas in where you already have the fiber network, and instead of doing connections on a onesie-twosie basis, is there a neighborhood where there's already fiber that you could begin to offer the residential service? So based on the infrastructure that already exists, is there a way to get like an entire, I don't know what the 30% number is, but is there a way to get like a neighborhood plugged in? It sounds like you've tried doing that with Churchill, but I'm sure that there are other neighborhoods where, again, the infrastructure exists, but could we make it available?
Yeah, so for instance, with the Cubic building, we're running right down the street. The building was, under construction. It was very easy to bring the fiber into the building and run the fiber throughout the building. And we had some success there due to the competition kind of made a mistake, so we were able to grab some customers, and it kind of made sense to do it. And plus, we also had a business customer that also helped. So that made sense to do it there. So we had one success, and we've had one failure. And we're just trying to, so like with the fiber hood, so kind of what you do is you say, all right, let's take the city, let's break it up into, 14, 15, whatever fiber hoods. And then from there, you look at, how many people are we metering? And we can kind of come up with a number, and then you start to, what's it gonna cost to build out the fiber into that area? We gotta buy hardware, we got to have upstream internet providers. So there's a whole list of things you go through. And then you try to figure it out. And then what the take rate's gonna be determines how many years is it gonna take to pay back the investment.
So what part of what we're doing this year, or for the coming year, we've talked to the commission in detail about this. And so what we've committed to doing is to map out a little bit clearer plan as to defining some requirements that would have to be met for any particular neighborhood to qualify for a build out. And so we're going to, identify what those requirements are, and then try to identify. I mean, we would love to get, customers and find one where it's economically viable. It makes sense for the customer, it makes sense financially for us, because we'd love to pick up the revenue.
I'm going to ask one more question. To what extent are you doing education and outreach? Because I would imagine that there's probably an unfamiliarity with fiber and what an asset it is. And so when you're sending out the surveys, to what extent do you think you're getting people who are informed about what fiber is and able to make a decision about switching over, or to make an informed, to give an informed response in the survey?
Kirk does quite a bit of education with our current customer base. Since we haven't committed to serving the residential, we really haven't targeted education to the residential consumer to date. But that'll certainly be a component. And I think if you look at what Westfield has done, they've done a very good job at education and outreach to push their product.
As they're rolling it out?
Yes.
But not beforehand in terms of generating interest or data?
Well, as they target a neighborhood, or what they call a fiberhood, in advance of that, they're going in and trying to get the take rate as high as they can.
I see. So it is very much in advance.
So that will be part of the strategy.
Okay, so I think that's all that I have. Is there anyone else from the public who wanted to ask a question? Okay. I think this one's all set then. Complied with. Motion that it be complied with.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
The ayes have it. Out of your,
It makes sense to do 3 and 4 together, at least half of it, 3 and 4.
Yeah.
Ryan said the police were coming, right?
Yeah, but it's already 7:20, so.
Where is Ryan? Did the police department say any specific time they're coming?
No, but they said they were going to send a representative.
So I think we'll start with the G&E since they're here.
Yeah.
Motion to suspend the necessary rules and take up items number 4 and 5 together.
All in favor?
Aye. Oh, I'm sorry, it's not 5,
3 and
it's
4.
3 and 4.
3 and 4.
Sorry about that.
It's okay. All right, so let me just read this.
Want to read it up here?
Yeah, but where's the actual order? Oh, true. Okay, here it is. Item number 3. All right, introduced by Councilor Rebecca Lisi. Order the mayor coordinate with the Holyoke Gas Electric Department and the Holyoke Police Department to provide training to all municipal employees for how to identify and deal with cyber threats. All in favor of taking off the table?
Aye.
Aye.
And then 4 was
And
public
4
with
as
that.
well. Order that first of all, introduced by Councilor Rebecca Lisi. Order the City Council invite the Chief of Police and any appropriate mental health care professions to inform us.
It's 4, not 5.
Oh, this is out of order.
That's it.
Yeah. I'm sorry. This was out of, it was mixed up. All right. Once again, introduced by Councilor Rebecca Lisi. Order the Holyoke Gas and Electric, alongside with the Holyoke Police Department, develop a protocol for identifying, reporting, and alerting City Hall employees of possible cyber threats and how to avoid them. All in favor of taking both up a package?
Aye.
You guys have it. Go ahead.
So, we had a security breach a while back with the treasurer falling victim to a phishing scam. And it seems that, at least from where I sit in the council chambers, that there should be some ongoing trainings on how phishing scams and other sorts of cyber scams work, so that we, our City Hall employees are informed and alert on the lookout. I don't know to what extent the G&E is monitoring for these types of threats in the system. I know at UMass, for example, we get alerts whenever there's some sort of phishing scam, and there's a way to report it, and there's also a way that the university's OIT service then sends out an alert to all users on that email, for example, the UMass email network. So those are the two things that I think you could speak best to at this point in time. And then would you be in a position to do trainings in City Hall?
So the first thing with this is, as you mentioned, user training. And Kirk oversees our cybersecurity training, and the same program that he has implemented, we have shared with the city, and it's now in the hands of the HR department. And I understand that they're evaluating the program that HG&E uses as well as another program. So my understanding is that they're in process of making a selection, and then that will be followed by implementation. So implementation is going to be overseen by HR. But the program that Kirk uses is very effective, and he can give you some numbers, but it really starts with training people on what is social engineering, what is phishing, spear phishing, ransomware, malware, and all the stuff that you need to be aware of in today's cyber environment.
Mm-hmm. Kirk,
So,
did you
yeah, so
develop
we-
it in-house? Is this your own program that you
So
developed?
it's a company called KNOW-B4, KNOWBE4. And so we hire them, and what they do is they'll do a web-based training for all our employees. They'll go through it. There's testing, and you get certified, and so what you do before the training, we send out these fake emails to everybody, and we see who clicks on them, and we get a baseline. And then what we do is we say, all right, let's start this training program. Then we implement the training program, and then what will happen is we will constantly throughout the year send out emails, and he doesn't know about it. I'm the only one who knows what they are, and we send them out, and we see, and we start seeing, okay, what's happened. And so what's happened is you're seeing that clicking and opening up that document, it's gotten better, right? So we started out over 10% of the population was opening these documents that they shouldn't, and then now we're down to 3%.
3%, wow.
So it's a very effective tool. I feel it's worth the investment to do it at HG&E. And then you'll have, occasional users that you got to kind of maybe retrain and spend a little more time with them, but it's a very, very effective tool. And it's great, and everyone does it. And then if someone comes into the company new, or we just bring so many more individuals onto an email, they have to go through the training process before they can get onto the email. And it's great. You're talking probably $2,500 a year cost, and for instance, one of the things they talk about is when you go to a Starbucks. What they'll do is an individual will go in, they'll have a little device, and they'll capture your information of the folks sitting around. And he says, don't go on bank accounts. Don't go into your checking account or your banking account or your investment account. Stay away from that, because they retrieve that information with this box they have. And it's just little things like that. It's pretty good. So
You said 2,500?
about $2,500 a year, yeah. This one was about $7,244 for 3 years.
And do you know if we are offered any discounts because we are related to you?
Yep.
Okay. All right, I'll be checking in with HR about that. And then in terms of a protocol for dealing with threats, are you able to identify them because since the city email addresses, I believe, come through the G&E's network, right? Server? I don't have the right vocabulary for this.
The city has their own server and firewall, but you're on our fiber.
We are on your fiber.
Yes, so all the locations are connected with fiber.
So it's the city's firewall that would set up the protocols for what traffic they're going to,
Yep.
and how they're going to address it. But I guess getting back to the protocols, this training steers the student to assume there's always a threat. And, you know, I think you have to operate in that way today. So, you know, there can be a protocol, and I think Kirk mentioned that he works with the police on several levels with the IT. So we'll probably have a conversation with them to see if there's a more formal protocol. But typically, we get utility notifications of things that we should be aware of in the realm of security for the utility. And so if there's anything that we become aware of that would be helpful to the, you know, city users, we would pass that to Kirk and it would get on to the users. And the same thing with any of the antivirus software notifications that we get. But I think that if you do the training, you're 90% of the way there.
Who monitors our firewall?
So the city hired HG&E to have staff, 2 individuals who are staffed at City Hall, and they monitor the server, the firewalls, and all the assets.
So potentially, even though we would be at 90% with cybersecurity training that is directed at the users, there's still a 10% coverage that perhaps these 2 different individuals may be able to help identify and monitor.
Yes, or whoever the city is using at the time for its IT consultant.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and then, so one part was the training, one part was the protocol for how to deal with it, and then I guess that's it. In terms of the follow-up, I think that the rest is really just part of the police department's own, like when there is a breach, and that's why it would be nice to have the conversation alongside one another to when there is a breach, what are the protocols for following up? And
Yeah, so I can get with the police department and have some discussion with them.
yeah, so ex post, like this is all the prophylactic measures, like avoiding and preventing the city becoming victim to a security threat. But then once we do have some sort of security breach, are there measures in place to bolster the firewall and also help to identify where the threat came from? I guess those are the 2
Yeah,
things.
so currently, right now, what happens is there's 2 individuals or HG&E employees who are stationed at City Hall, but they have the full backing of the IT department from Holyoke Gas and Electric. So we have a total of 17 individuals with various engineering degrees that will support the city. So again, you have the 2 full-time individuals, but then as needed, decisions are made as to what hardware needs to be purchased, servers have to be upgraded, you need to buy, maintenance on your equipment, laptops need to be purchased, and we currently do that on a daily basis for the city.
Okay. Any other questions?
So you said that 10% of the employees were opening bad links. Now it's down to 3%. Can you just tell me if Jim Lavelle is part of that 3%?
So I have to say that I cannot tell anybody who is what, but they do get a very firm coaching from me.
No, so I was, before my current position, I was on pharmaceutical for years, and they probably had a very similar program where we had fake emails, and we actually had to report the emails. We got bonuses on how many fake ones we reported, and then they had to slow us down because employees were reporting everyone,
Right.
and especially everyone that came from our bosses, which was like, I didn't get to see that email. I reported it. Do you want to comply with it?
Yeah, motion that it be complied.
Second.
All in favor?
Thank you.
Ayes have it. All right, so now moving on to item number 4, introduced by Council. I actually read it, so it's on the table.
We set with the genie?
Yeah, well, I guess we're all set with that because we just did both those. All right, gentlemen, thank you very much for coming down.
You're welcome.
Do you have any questions or further information for us? No? All right, well, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And Kurt, my brother-in-law, Charlie Zuma says hi.
Thank you. Yeah, he's a good man.
Yes. All right, gentlemen. All right, so,
Thank you.
5?
Well, again, the HPD's not here as far as I
They're coming,
understand.
Still need who's going to send a representative. Dr. Manny? 4 days ago. Huh? You talked to Manny? Yeah. So you want to
Take a motion to lay it on the table?
Well, since we have guests here, I think we should take it up and get as far as we can
Yeah, no,
and hold on to the
Make a motion to
information for another day.
remove from the table for discussion?
Second,
All in favor?
aye.
Ayes have it. Do you want to give Manny a call? Do you have a cell phone? I don't have a cell phone. Do you?
I think I got it.
He made it clear that he was not going to be able to come here, but that he would send a representative here. He's out of town.
All right, well, I apologize for the people in the audience, but as Rebecca said, Councilor Lisi said, we'll certainly take it up and go along as far as we can. So do you want to introduce the people?
Do you mind reading the order first?
Yeah, so it's filed by Councilor Lisi. In order that the City Council invite the Chief of Police and any appropriate mental health professionals, care professionals, to inform us of the best practices for dealing with overdoses in the field, as well as current protocol for dealing with passive exposure to fentanyl and other dangerous opioids and or narcotics. Take it off the table.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Go ahead, Councilor Lisi.
Thanks. So I invited, through Ryan, Liz Wynott from Tapestries, Needle Exchange Program, and Dr. Stephen, hold on, Jones.
Come on in. We don't bite. Of course. Sure, just sit at a table with a microphone, or a desk rather, and if not, we can move one over to you. Welcome, everyone.
Thank you for coming. So I'll give a little bit of background on why I filed the order. There was a fire earlier in the year, and it seemed that it wasn't clear, but that there might have been some passive fentanyl exposure to the emergency responders. And from what I understood, that there's a very high unlikelihood of passive exposure happening. And so I was just wondering if we ever found out whether or not it was some sort of fentanyl exposure. So I wanted the police department here for that. I also want to know the best practices that the police department is implementing related to when they encounter fentanyl and other dangerous substances. And then I also wanted to know what kind of what was I going to say? So with the police department, so what are the best practices that they're following, and then how often are they updating their best practices in the field? So like what are the current recommendations that they're using, and then when was the last time they made an update to their procedures?
Maybe just for the purpose of people at home, maybe we have these wonderful experts in. Maybe can they just give a background of what fentanyl is? Because I'm sure it's a common word in many different areas, but in other areas I'm not sure it is. And just give kind of a background what fentanyl is and how bad it is and that sort of thing, if you don't mind. Thank you. Just push that button
Push the green
so the green
yeah.
light's on. Thank you, Doctor.
Got it, okay. My name is Steve Jones, and I'm a public health physician, and I've worked on drug user health issues for a while. And there was an episode in 2006 when fentanyl sort of appeared out of nowhere, and about 1,000 people died of fentanyl overdoses. And fentanyl is a synthetic opioid. Heroin, you have to grow a poppy, you have to scratch the poppy, you have to gather up the ooze that comes out, then you have to process that. So it's a long, complicated, and it depends on having agricultural places you can grow it. And fentanyl, you can just get a good chemist and make it. And so it's highly attractive because it doesn't depend on getting stuff from Afghanistan or somewhere else. It's much more potent than heroin. It's, I guess, 50 times more potent? Something on that order. And so there's a very interesting a picture of what is a dose of heroin, and you see something in the bottle, and when you see fentanyl, there's just a couple couple of granules, and so it's very different in its potency. And the 2017 overdose statistics were just released, and there were 70,000 people that died of overdoses. Of those, about
I'm sorry to interrupt, in Massachusetts or the
no,
other country?
in Massachusetts, there'd be in the United States. I'm sorry, I don't mean to be. I'm not sure of the number in Massachusetts, but Massachusetts has been highly affected.
Mm-hmm.
And of those 70,000, about 26 or 7,000 involve fentanyl or other synthetic, in other words, made by a chemist, not from the opium poppy. And it's very clear that the places that have fentanyl have very high overdose rates. And that's been the Northeast, the sort of Ohio, Pennsylvania, and the Southeast to some extent. And the west of the Mississippi, they have very little fentanyl, and
Why is that?
Yeah.
who the hell knows? You
Well,
know,
Ryan,
there's, I'd love to be in a cartel planning session and find out, but it's something about how the drugs are produced and distributed.
Okay.
And the heroin in west of the Mississippi is this gummy black tar stuff. So, but the reason why that is, we don't know, and fentanyl's beginning to appear west of the Mississippi, so they may have the horrible overdoses. So, so they're big, and there's carfentanil, which is animal tranquilizer. If you have an elephant you want to pull the teeth of, you can shoot them with a carfentanil dose, and they'll go to sleep. So it's been even more frightening, I guess. And I think that people have heard about fentanyl, and it strikes fear into people. And there've been multiple videos of police officers and others who theoretically he knocked some white powder off of his shoulder, and then he was in the hospital. And then there was another one of a police officer in a car who they treated with naloxone, and those are, I think those were certainly not fentanyl exposures, but they were portrayed as that, and I think that if I were a first responder, I would be scared also. So that's some of the background, and one of the things, and Rebecca, I did not bring this, but there's a recommendation from the two
I
major.
have these two circulated on the desks.
Yes,
Yeah, so the two toxicology.
and basically they say that the sort of incidental exposure is not going to cause a lot of trouble. If there's some way that people inhale the powder, then that can be worse, obviously. And so I think it's good to be cautious. I think the risk to first responders is less than most first responders think. And Liz, we have this, which is a little, this. I don't know, does the
We have it
police
up here.
department have these?
I don't know, but we have copies, so we can definitely circulate it over there.
And I think that the recommendations from the two national toxicology groups is really important, because that's authoritative, and certainly says that incidental exposures are not a big deal. So, Liz.
Well, I guess the only thing that I'll add is so we've really started to notice the presence of fentanyl within the past, I would say, about 2 to 3 years.
So it's new.
It's newer to the extent that it's around. It is new. Eastern Massachusetts was particularly hit hard first, and then the fentanyl started coming over to Western Mass, unfortunately. But we've had to change our practices a little bit. We provide Narcan education to people at highest risk of witnessing an overdose, and One thing we used to always say to people is that most overdoses take approximately 30 to 90 minutes, and the image of somebody with a needle in their arm was a little fictionalized, but we're finding with fentanyl, the scary thing about it is it's stronger acting, but shorter lasting. So we're finding that a lot of people are overdosing extremely quickly, and the point from ingestion to death is much quicker than it used to be. The other problem that we're unfortunately facing with fentanyl is it doesn't last as long. So whereas a few years ago that just the average user was using about 3 to 4 bags a day, let's say, now it's 5 to 6. So the
Can I ask you, this might be a dumb question.
Yeah.
So do you smoke it? Do you snort it? How does that work?
you can snort it. You can smoke it, but it's not usually smoked on its own. At least the powder here isn't. And then inject it.
Okay, inject it, yeah.
Yeah. We are, or not we, but the state has been seeing overdoses from sniffing as well, which is unusual. It's still kind of rare, but it is happening more. And then there have been cases of other drugs such as cocaine being contaminated with fentanyl.
Oh, so somebody's buying cocaine and it's contaminated, they don't even know it?
Yeah, yeah. Again, it doesn't happen all the time, but we are seeing it more and more. It's scary.
Very scary.
And fentanyl was introduced 40 years ago, I don't know exactly, and it was used primarily in the operating room where they say count to 4 or whatever, and
Say goodnight.
yes, and you're gone by the time you get to 2 because it's very rapid acting and short duration, and they use it sometimes for short procedures.
So it is active, physicians do use
Yes,
it?
yes,
Okay.
and there are fentanyl patches for people who have chronic pain that they can put on their arm. So it's a legitimate pharmaceutical product that has a lot of uses, and then it's made non-pharmaceutically by chemists who probably make a lot of money.
Now, how do these, how do these chemists, I mean, they must have a background in real science and good education. I mean, how do they go out and make this?
Well, there are recipes as to how to do it, and I'm not a chemist. I assume some of them have to know, but there are online recipes about how to make fentanyl, and I don't know how complicated it is, but it's whoever. They have conquered the problems of making it, and it's being made in huge volumes. Some people say mostly in China, some people say in Mexico, maybe some in the United States. It's not clear.
But yeah, go ahead, sir.
Thank you. You all set?
Go ahead. I'm going to ask another question afterwards.
Okay. Thank you all for joining us. I think this is a very important topic. My real job is next door as a probation officer, and we have our own training and understand, and I agree with everything that's been said this evening, and probably even more, because there's not enough time to spend, or there should be a lot of time to spend on this topic and what some people refer to as the opioid crisis itself. Before I got a question for the doctor, but you know, I used to kid around or used to say, everyone says it's the pharmaceutical industry that started this, and Councilor Leahy used to be a pharmaceutical sales rep, and he'd look at me like I didn't do it, and there is truth to that. I think we understand, especially OxyContin, that there was a period of time where doctors overprescribed, but more important, when it was time to get off the painkiller, they had no way of weaning someone off, and they were just left on their own. Means they often turned to the streets and often found out the best, not the best, but the cheapest answer was heroin. We found that when it first came to Western Mass or came to this area, the fentanyl was being mixed with heroin, and that became, it's 50 to 100 times stronger on itself than heroin, but you mix it with heroin, now you've got a very potent batch of heroin that goes out in the street. The dealers would label it a little bit different. And the odd thing is the person who I think is the highest risk for the overdose is the person who is trying to, or just came out of detox, is trying to rehab from their addiction. Maybe it was a forced rehab. They were in jail over the weekend in a residential program, came out of detox, whatever it was. And before that, they were using 3, 5, 6, 7 bags a day. Now they're not using, or they're just, they got that relapse and they're going to go out and use, and they get a bag with fentanyl, and the lights go out immediately. And we have firsthand knowledge of that. I'll stop there. But it's scary. But Doctor, you said something that sparked my interest, because you mentioned a cartel. And I'm a believer that this isn't just the pharmaceutical industry, that this is part of marketing that the cartel is actually using to put a more potent drug out there and to get people addicted. And they're not worried about losing customers to overdoses, because they're just looking at it as a volume and a way to sell more bags and a way to generate more profit for their illegal industry itself. And is there any stats or any documentation of linking the cartels to this? Is there any studies been done?
I think there are some other practical incentives, because fentanyl, because it's very powerful, you have a smaller volume that you need to transport, so it's easier to hide and it's easier to move. So that's one advantage, and the other is you can create it in a chemistry lab. You don't have to get it from Afghanistan or Mexico, the hills of Mexico or something else. So those are, I think, two really strong reasons why people offering heroin or heroin-like stuff would trend over to fentanyl and the other synthetics, and because it's so powerful, mixing it, cutting it has to be a fine art, and I assume that some of that is the reason why people get overdoses, is because the dealers don't the sort of street dealers don't know necessarily what the hell is in, whether it's got fentanyl or it's heroin or it's carfentanil or something else. So, but the cartel behavior, I wish I understood.
When the fentanyl is mixed in, it's the batches are labeled with whatever they put on the bags. But when it's mixed in, the word of mouth is they're selling a strong batch. And those that are using regular and understand, and they go after it. I've heard, and I think it's documented too, some fentanyl does come from the Mideast, and it comes in. Some of it comes in through South America, and then it comes into the United States through South America by the cartels, even though they don't manufacture it themselves. They do. I think that's how it started to being blended in with heroin and being mixed in with heroin. We have had 2 police officers exposed. I know our police department has training. Sometimes we train together, but most of the time they do their training on their own. And they called it airborne, but I think it's the way you explained it. They're actually responding to a traffic accident. And in the car, there was fentanyl that must have gotten loose out of whatever it was packaged in. And I don't think they touched it because they just felt the symptoms. They both were immediately went to the emergency room, and the effects were very short-lived, but they determined later it was a fentanyl exposure itself, and I think that's what scares first responders is not. That was just earlier this year, and both police officers are fine, but it is scary. It's scary when we're out there. We do home checks, and there are things that we have to watch out for, and you don't know when you come into exposure for it. But again, I thank you, and I appreciate the participation this evening.
Lisi, go.
Sorry. It's a bit unfortunate that we don't have HB here tonight to talk about what their practice is in the field. But at the Tapestry site here in Holyoke, are you trained to kind of manage a situation that a police officer may find themselves in where there's a risk of passive or casual exposure? And then do you have a set of best practices that we could actually just get a sense of what you're doing in the field?
Well, I think the one thing that we do are Narcan trainings. So we haven't done any education with the police force in Holyoke. We definitely have educated a lot of individual officers. We did a training with DPW a few months back, and I really liked that one because that's a group of people that does come in contact with a lot, potentially people that have overdosed, really. And with the training that we do, we talk about the signs and symptoms of an overdose, and we talk about what is heroin, what is fentanyl, and how to respond to an overdose. And from my experience, I think that's the best method of education is to prepare people for what to come in contact with. We also do share like safety recommendations for first responders when meeting with anybody that has general contact with the public. I guess that when thinking about best practices, I unfortunately don't know updated information for the Holyoke Police Department, but the Hampden County Addictions Task Force is really focused on this issue, and that operates through DA Galuni's office, and they just received a large grant to distribute Narcan to people like first responders. So I think that there are ways now to get it at no cost. But I'm not sure where the Holyoke Police Department is at with that. But a good thing that's happening and has been going on for the past years through this task force is we've been able to collaborate a lot with the different groups that come in contact with opioid users. One thing that we do is we go to all of the Hampden County correctional facilities and we train people on Narcan, how to recognize an overdose, and things like what puts people at risk for an overdose. And we talk a lot about when you get out of jail or wherever, you don't have a tolerance anymore, so you are especially at high risk. And the Sheriff's Department lets us leave a kit, and it's put into the person's belongings so they can access it when they leave.
What's the kit?
It's a Narcan kit. Yeah. But one thing we really try to do is work with, or at least get to know and try to talk to business owners around here and different places that have public bathrooms and where there might be instances of using and that put people at high risk. And we've had some success with it. We find that it's really hard to work with corporations. So McDonald's is really difficult to get their buy-in to let us, like we would love to do a Narcan training with them. But we've had a lot of good luck, like with librarians. We work with the library and with different business owners that come across both syringes and people using. It's been great.
It's the Hampden County what task force?
It's the Hampden County Addiction Task Force, HCAT.
And so you're providing trainings for Narcan to a number of different private and public entities at this point in time.
Yep.
That's great. The one last question that I had, I saw a documentary recently. It was a short documentary. It's about so people who are addicted to heroin in Philadelphia, and what they've been doing there is because of the rise of fentanyl, they're giving out kits so that people could test their product to see whether or not that it's contaminated with fentanyl. And then there's different ways to use that bag if it is contaminated, because it seems like they're not going to not do it is what I kind of took away from that documentary. But there's different ways that they could reduce their risk of actually overdosing. Are you all doing trainings like that, or?
We aren't doing them officially as an agency, but we do know a lot of individuals that do give out fentanyl testing strips. And the thing I really like about that is it's a tool that can empower the person using drugs to know more about what they're doing. So it's a urine test strip, but you can use even like the residue from the water or from the bag to test it and see if it's positive for fentanyl. And if it is, we've been trying to spread the message, start low, go slow. It's just this thing that the state's kind of catching on to, which is where we're educating people about if it's positive fentanyl, that you really, we don't know what's out there now. It's all over the place, is using a much lower amount and using it at a slower pace, because you can always do more, but you can't do less. And we find that education really effective. So the person may still definitely use the drug, but they know that it's much stronger and to use less. And that's really good at preventing overdoses.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Any other information that you think, given that we're lay folks and we don't really know much about this, I guess, industry and the practices, anything else in terms of like last bits of wisdom that you want to leave with us?
Well, I don't know if this is a good opportunity for Pedro to talk about the success of the Narcan program among the people that we work with, because we work with a lot of people from Holyoke. Do you want to talk about that? Just with the participants that you see in the success of the Narcan distribution program?
Yeah, so we've been handing out Narcan to any participant that comes into our site, whether they're actively using, in recovery. They can come in and always get a kit. They go through an individual training in one of the rooms with one of the counselors. Usually training takes about 20 to 30 minutes. We kind of explain what Narcan is, what's happening to the body when a person is experiencing an overdose, and how the Narcan works, and what's going on in the person's body once that Narcan's administered. We explain the Good Samaritan law on signs and symptoms to look out for an overdose, risk factors, and other harm reduction practices that they can practice to try to avoid experiencing overdoses. Just recently, we had a Spanish community Narcan done in strictly Spanish language here at Holyoke. It was open to the public at the Holyoke Public Library. And we're just trying to reach a different audience and try to break down the stigma piece that goes along with it and just get people talking. Because we're losing people at a rapid rate, and the problem is getting worse. So we're just trying to spread that word out.
So it's getting worse? So
well, gradually it's been getting worse, especially with the onset of fentanyl slowly creeping in or anything like that. We're start seeing a lot more overdoses and everything like that. So we're just trying to provide the education to anybody that we can. Liz kind of touched on it about going into county jails. We also go into detoxes, sober homes, community centers.
Can I ask you a question? I was just talking to Rebecca.
Yeah.
Do you guys ever touch base with, you're talking about the first responders. I think oftentimes the people who are on the streets, like postal women and postal men, you guys ever talk to the post office? Because they're on the streets every day. I'm sure they probably see more than a lot of people.
We haven't, I don't think we've gotten in touch with the postal department, but that's a good point you brought up.
Yeah, they're in every house.
Like we said, we do a lot of small businesses in the area. A lot of the times we go on outreach, we strap it on with backpacks with a lot of supplies in it, and we'll stop into local businesses and see if they're interested in, especially some with a lot of high activity going on around, see if they're interested in obtaining a Narcan kit, having it on their premises, explaining to them how to use it, what to look out for. We also bring information cards, a hotline card that's specific to Holyoke, for discarded syringes throughout the city. So we try to build relationships with, whether if it's residents, small business owners, different community members, people that are in Holyoke, and just kind of like provide that education and get people talking. And
are you bringing the trainings to people where they are? Are you trying to
Definitely,
bring
definitely.
people to
So
you?
people can always come into one of our sites. When we do outreach, we bring Narcan, and if people are interested, sometimes they just want to refill their Narcan kit. They already been to the training, they used it, or they gave it to somebody that needed it, so we can just refill their order for Narcan right then and there. But if they've never gotten a kit before, we'll do on-the-spot training.
How long does it take before it expires? So say if somebody had it in their house.
So about a year. So all the kits that we have usually have an expiration date about a year, but it's still effective after expiration date. It only loses 9% of its potency after 30 days. So it's definitely still effective. And we always tell people, proper storage for it, especially now with the winter months coming in. You don't want to keep it in your car. It's medication. It could freeze, or anything like that. So we tell people not to keep it, keep it on their person. If it's in their bag, bring their bag inside or anything like that. And we just try to get into as many people's hands as possible and try to get it out there.
Dr. Jones wanted to make a comment.
Sure.
Steve. Two things. As far as the first responders, in general, if they have Narcan is the brand name for naloxone, which is this magical drug that if you have somebody turning blue on the floor and you inject them or you put it into their nose, in a short time they'll wake up and.
Is it a steroid or?
It
Blocker, I'm sure.
works with receptors that the Narcan, that the heroin or fentanyl is on, and when the opioids are on those receptors in the brain, people slow down the rate they breathe, and to the point that they don't take any breaths at all. So the Narcan comes in, knocks the opioids off. So if the first responders have Narcan, they're really going to be protected, even if it is fentanyl. And the nice thing about naloxone is it's hard to say risk-free, but it's very, very low risk. It works on opioid intoxication, and that's about all.
Well, I was going to say, a couple of weeks ago, I watched 60 Minutes every Sunday. I think about a month ago, they had a big segment on
Yes.
this, and they were showing the different, the one you inhale, the one you inject, and there's a new one that came out that actually speaks, it talks.
Oh, yeah,
It
that's
very expensive.
$4,000.
Oh, what?
$4,000, but that's a scheme to do.
Oh, wow.
Anyway,
My point
there are
of-
multiple ones, and there's the old-fashioned injectable.
Yeah. Well, my point of bringing this up is the fact that he was saying, this doctor was saying there's very low risk, and so if you see a person that you're assuming that is overdosing, go for it.
Yep.
Don't sit there and try to figure out if he's overdosing or not. Usually, because it has low other side effects so just do it.
It's a clinical test for an overdose. You give naloxone, and if the person responds, then it's an opioid overdose.
Right.
And so as long as the first responders have naloxone, Narcan with them, they'll be pretty much completely protected. The second thing is the super importance of getting what sometimes is called MAT, medication-assisted treatment. And in Rhode Island, they provided methadone and buprenorphine to people in jail and in prison. And the death rate from overdoses went down in Rhode Island. And it would be ideal that all jails would provide this to people, and that as an introduction to taking these medications for months or years, and that's a really effective way to deal with the opioid addiction and reduce the risk of overdose. And it's not being used as much as it should.
And that's medical assisted treatment is the narcotic substitution conversations that we've been having here about the clinics that do this sort of narcotic substitution. Is that the same, one and the same?
Well, narcotics is a judgmental word. Narcotics are evil and bad. And what you're doing here is it's sort of like providing insulin to somebody who has diabetes. You're providing the medication that can help them deal with the illness that they have. And there's, 12-step programs. I don't know what the probation system does, but people force individuals who are getting methadone or buprenorphine to stop, which is not a very good idea. But there's a lot of misunderstanding about all this stuff and a lot of stigma and judgment.
If I can answer that, I think it's important. Probation doesn't make referrals for methadone or for Suboxone, in that matter, even for Vivitrol. However, probation does recognize that as an individual's form of treatment, a choice of treatment, and we certainly work with the clinics. Unfortunately, the clinics don't always want to work with us, but that's not a topic for tonight. But probation does understand that these offering the medical assistance is important. Most important is, we work very closely with the BHNs, and we want to make referrals as quickly as possible for detox. We cannot make referrals for residential programs, and I understand tonight we kind of started at a topic that's here, and I just don't want I want people listening at home to understand, and I don't think anybody's going to disagree with me that the best policy is abstinence. And the best policy is to get people before they become addicted, and the education to understand that this is not an addiction you beat on your own very, very easily. That first high from heroin is euphoria. I can't even talk, Rebecca. That the heroin addict is just chasing that forever. And when they hear there's fentanyl in some heroin, they just think they're going to get that one-time high they had maybe a year ago again. And what scares me about testing for fentanyl is some people are going to use that test to find the fentanyl, not to stay away from it. And that's the part that's real scary. It's a little bit beyond, because that's not what we're here to talk about tonight, because I think we're talking about recognizing that this crisis has not gone away. It is growing, not just in Massachusetts, but across the country. If you think our stats are bad, look at some of the stats for Ohio. And there's just a tremendous amount of education and law enforcement that needs to take place in terms of getting, or at least curtailing the supply of this that's coming into this country, to a level where, not only are we going to be, we shouldn't be talking about saving people, who are addicted, but we should be talking about preventing people from becoming addicted too. And I think that it's a dual message, but what you brought to the table tonight is very important to what's happening out there, and I just hope that the world wakes up. Now, this is talking from a guy whose drug education from my father was very simple. He gave me a sign for my bedroom that said, "Peanut butter is better than pot." And I won't tell you what year that was, doctor, but it stuck in my mind all these years. It worked. Peanut butter is better than pot. Well, it was 1970 something, but it made me think.
Apparently you ate a lot.
Not about peanut butter. It made me think about making choices, and before you make choices, understanding what your choice is.
I would just add one thing, and there's a medical professor at BU School of Public Health, and he wrote a piece in the Washington Post, and he said, "Don't think of detox as treatment. Treatment is medications." And what you do when you put somebody in detox is they lose their tolerance, and so they're at risk of getting overdosed. So and it's a big change. I mean, I didn't see it at first, but I think it's absolutely true. Detox is useful in some ways, it's dangerous, and it's not treatment.
What's important too is that recently the money is now available, and we're seeing detox BHNs expanding that into a TSS unit, which is still a transitional detox, recognizing exactly that and giving the individual time, hopefully, if needed and committed to, transition into a residential program for several months. That is I think, one of the real ways of getting the person out of addiction, but, sorry.
Oh, no, that's okay. I just wanted to add, though, that the Providence Hospital and Carlson Detox, they do offer Suboxone now, so they'll start people on it if they want when they're getting there. And then the system in the past few years has gotten a lot better in doing the soft, warm handoff from detox, whether it's TSS or a shelter or to a clinic. So there has been a lot of improvement in that. And then also I think the hospitals just in this past year, they're going to have to implement ways to connect people directly to Suboxone if they come into the emergency department. So Mercy Hospital is already able to start people on Suboxone when they're there. And I don't know where Holyoke Hospital is on that, but I know they're working toward it at least, and they did recently open a Suboxone clinic to try to also meet that need.
So I think we're about ready to wrap up quite a bit. It's really nice to see that, again, in the absence of HPD, we have Counselor McGivern here who has a foot in the world of probation and law enforcement, and then it seems that a lot of the best practices that you have been talking about from the medical and public health perspective are being mimicked in the protocols that they are using in the law enforcement world. So at least I guess the impression that I get is that people are talking to one another in these two worlds, and there is I guess a currency to what's going on in the law enforcement world. So that's promising. I will be following up with HPD and just trying to figure out what they are currently doing for best practices, how often they're updated, and I think from a community standpoint, and in order to like dispel some of the perhaps mythologies that are out there, I'd like to know if there is someone who is suspected of having a casual exposure. I think we should make sure that there is some testing done afterwards so that we could document, was it actually fentanyl or was it something else? I think that's an important move that I'd like to know whether or not the HPD is open to. And then I guess the takeaways that I have from our conversation tonight is that the risk of casual exposure is very low. And then if you're wearing the protective gear, is even lower. And that to the last point that Dr. Jones made, that any emergency responder that's coming in contact with fentanyl, if they are equipped with naloxone or Narcan, then they are actually completely protected from actually the risk. But really I think people are concerned not only about the risks of contamination, but the exposure, because it is like a foreign substance that you didn't invite into your body. And I think that the measures that people could take in advance to avoid the casual exposure, given that it's very low, I think is very easy to achieve. But I do understand people's worry in terms of coming into contact and having drugs in their body that they didn't ask for. I think that's why we want to be able to take the protective measures up front. All right. So I motion that it be tabled for now until we could get these responses back from HPD.
So I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thanks for taking the time out tonight.
Appreciate it.
Some great information. We do greatly appreciate it.
Training session. Okay, sure, thanks.
Thanks for meeting, sir. Thank you very much. Oh, you're perfect timing. Thank you very much, sir. Thank you very much. We appreciate it. So the other two items on the agenda are introduced by Counselor McGee. Do you just want to take them up and table them? Did you have any indication with Todd? No. I knew he had said to me one of them was already complied with, but I don't know which one. So, want to just keep them on the table?
Make a motion to table both
Okay,
for
sounds good.
future.
All right. Anybody else have any other questions?
No, we're good.
Seeing none, all right.
Motion adjourned.
Just a second. All in favor? The ayes have
Aye.
it. Thank you. Thank you, guys.